It's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. Old school casual Friday style podcast with Denny Mayo. How's it going, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. I've got a sleeping child upstairs, and I've got a glass with some spirits in it and also some soda water. So I'm doing all right.
I'm drinking some Lake Erie Monster.
Is that, I assume that's some sort of beer?
Yeah, it's a Great Lakes Brewing Company, and it's one of the really good ones.
Yeah.
That has, it's like, I think it's 9.1% alcohol.
Okay.
And so you only need one.
Yeah.
Or I only need one.
Is that one of the ones that comes in like a 4-pack because it's so potent?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm more, I prefer to drink less actual volume. But it's not quite cold enough yet for me to break out, Scotch and things like that. I can't drink Scotch in the summer so much.
Have you tried it with soda water, like a Scotch, like a Ricky or something?
I've only ever had it neat.
Okay. Because Scotch with soda water is it tends to be. I have this sort of progression when I go to weddings, and I'll drink something neat, or maybe on the rocks. Like I'll drink it straight for a while. And then usually it'll be whiskey or bourbon. And then later on, for whatever reason, like my slightly subconscious brain ends up going just towards Scotch and soda because it's like, it's diluted down. It's a little more filling, and it's also just delicious. But you have too many of those, and then you wake up the next morning with like that Scotch taste in the back portion of your mouth, and it's not so fun. But yeah, Scotch can be fine in the summer, but it's much better. Much better in the fall winter time.
Yeah, the only thing I've got kind of, I moved toward for a while there. I was drinking Boilermakers and different style. That it had become kind of a stylish, almost like a separate menu at this one place that Jen and I would go to, and so I was trying all kinds of different combinations of scotches and beers, and it was really fun. But Jen always had to drive home.
There's not much coming back from something like that.
No. And there was one night where we did that, and then we went to a movie, and I'm trying to remember. It was a giant book, and then Ben Affleck was in it, and I barely remember the movie. But technically I saw the movie.
Ben Affleck's been in so many movies that have been relatively forgettable that I can't even try to figure out what it was.
Well, I'm looking it up now. So, Gone Girl.
Oh yeah, that was a long movie.
Was it?
And it was. It's something like it's over 2 hours. And my wife and I watched it. She had read the book, and it kept losing my attention. It kind of, I think we had watched House of Cards too recently, and it felt like it was sort of that same sort of like multi-dimensional chess sort of thing, where it's just like trying too hard to make you think too hard.
Well, that's interesting because tonally it's almost kind of similar.
Yeah, but to its credit, like it was only 2.5 hours long instead of going into a third season that goes into a fourth where nothing really happens like House of Cards has done.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to give up on House of Cards.
Yeah, it's really hard to figure out, like, if you've watched a show for, a certain amount of time, like, when to bail, especially with, like, it's easy with cable because, like, for a couple of years we dropped cable and now we have it again. But when we dropped cable, it's just like, okay, we're done. We're not watching the shows anymore. Like, I still haven't watched the last 2 seasons of Parks and Rec because we just didn't have it conveniently available, and I've heard only wonderful things about it, and I love the show. I just haven't watched it. But like things like Netflix, where you've got their content is just produced so that you sit there and basically drip it straight into your veins, and don't do anything else for 12 hours is a little bit harder. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, next time around, I'm sure we'll watch it. Like this past season of Orange is the New Black, I did not give a shit, and it was still really good. And my wife really wanted to watch it. And
was it really good? Because I was done midway through season 2.
Maybe it was really good. I don't know. I trust other people's judgment on that.
Okay.
I wasn't all that enthralled by it, but it's still it still seemed to be working on the same emotional level that it has the whole time, which is to say that it spoke to all sorts of issues that I personally can't really relate to because I'm not a woman in prison. But, it seemed like it was really good. I just, for whatever reason, when we started watching, I was just like, oh, we're watching this again, and it's probably going to be the same thing. It's going to walk in the same circle, and maybe I didn't give it a fair shake, but, looking at the ratings online, they're all very good for it. So I don't know. I tend to trust the aggregate sometimes more than my own opinion, whether that pulls my overall opinion up or down. Like, I just kind of say, well, if everyone thinks it was crap, maybe it was crap, and maybe I'm just wrong. So I don't know. I don't know. Like, House of Cards is just, it's hard. It's really hard to keep watching, and I'm sure I'll watch it, and I'm sure I'll just sit there and be like, oh, why did I do this? This was a bad idea. I knew it, but whatever. That's
well, it kind of reduces because you can watch it back to back to back. It reduces your overall, it doesn't have to dominate your brain for 3 months or whatever.
That's
if you're
true.
waiting.
Yeah. I mean, like, so my wife and I, because we have a kid and because we're old and because our lives are uninteresting at this point, we usually we'll make dinner and watch one episode of an hour-long show, and then that's it for the night. So we'll watch one episode a day, which still is basically back to back to back, right?
Yeah.
It's not breathing. We're not sitting there and thinking about it for a week, most people do.
And I had friends who used to watch each episode of Lost twice. Between weeks, they'd watch it on whatever Thursday night or whatever night it was on, and then they'd watch it again maybe on Monday. And I mean, that I almost don't think that happens anymore because there's so many things that you can watch.
Yeah, I mean, the first time we watched Lost was, it was a very bad idea. I was writing my dissertation, and I would get home from work, we'd make dinner, and we would watch 2 or 3 episodes of Lost in a row. And basically I would be the bellwether if I was just like, oh, let's watch another one. So we would sit and watch 3 episodes in a row on Netflix without any interruption. And I mean, that show, I think everybody at this point knows that, the end of an episode was effectively more dramatic than a commercial break. It was just, basically, everything stopped. And then so we pounded through it. We watched that show so quickly. It was absurd. No thinking about it. No, what happened? Why ask what happened when you can push the button and find out what happened? So, I don't know. I'm very spoiled and very used to the idea of just being able to watch another episode if I need to, and that's probably to the detriment of my own, my own watching critiques or whatever. But
the benefits of it are great too, though, because it's kind of. I was going to say that it democratized time period or something, but I don't think that's even the right way of saying that. I'm probably just butchering a bunch of words, but,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was going to follow it up and just say that new doesn't mean anything. The word new doesn't mean anything anymore because my wife and I never watch Freaks and Geeks. And so we're watching that right now. I think we're on episode 12 out of 18 total. And it's the coolest thing. And I mean, it might as well be new because it is to us. And the fact that it came out, the only thing that's distracting is that it's in 4:3 instead of 16:9 or whatever. It doesn't fit in the widescreen TV the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
We got over that pretty quick.
Yeah. We watched that not that long ago. I mean,
it democratized time.
Yeah. I mean, new being a completely arbitrary for a studio filmed show. New being completely arbitrary. It's it's not like it's live. It's just I guess new is it probably is a reasonable term, but it's also whatever. It's just it's been shot 3 weeks ago, so is it new? I guess it's new to the world. But I know.
The other thing that I was going to say to you, because you said you gave up cable and that kind of changed your patterns and stuff, and that happened to us when we moved last November. Because we lost basically everything that was on a DVR. Okay. And so it was almost like freedom because it canceled everything. We went back and we resubscribed to Mad Men so that we could catch the end of that series. But that was probably about the only one, that and kids shows. So that we had, a backlog of Jake and the Neverland Pirates. But that's it. And it was it was almost liberating to not have all these shows that we didn't really want to watch, sit there like to-do lists.
Yeah, I mean, I've done the same sort of thing. I was talking to a friend about, and she was really excited about a new show that was coming out, and I was just, incredibly dismissive about it because I was like, "What's it like? It's on NBC. Like, why the hell would I watch something on NBC? Like, because if I watch it and I like it, then now I'm like, because I don't have a DVR, then I'm stuck, and I've got to watch that show for like every week. It's appointment viewing, and we're at a point now where that seems antiquated and just unreasonable. And I could watch it online and still be served commercials or whatever. But I don't know. I just kind of don't want to do it. I've become spoiled by the sort of way that Netflix and HBO Go and all of those content provider services have kind of made things so available and made me not have to wait. I can just sit down and watch we've been watching, not No Reservations, but the CNN Bourdain show. We've been watching that for the past, I don't know, probably 3 weeks. And every night I just watch an episode. Like we go somewhere else with,
Parts
Bourdain,
Unknown.
Parts Unknown. And and so we just watch that and I don't have to wait. And we're going to catch up at some point, and then we'll just probably wait a year. And then we'll do that again, instead once it's on the next season's on Netflix.
That guy could host anything and I'd watch, I think.
Yeah. I saw that he's opening like a market in New York City, like a really large, basically like Italy, but for like Asian food, which
really
could be really interesting. Yeah.
Well, I find him so fascinating. He goes on radio shows all the time that I end up hearing, and not only is he the food guy and he's the travel guy, he's also like his entire family. His wife started it, but his entire family basically trains in MMA now because they just fell in love with the workout and the discipline and all the movements of it, and so it's just such a different dude.
Yeah,
and I love that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting show, and it goes into also like the first season they went into Jerusalem and basically went on both sides of the wall, maybe it was just they were in Palestine. He might have stopped in Jerusalem, but now that I think about it, I think he just went to Palestine and talked with Palestinians and talked with some Israeli settlers who were in one of the settlements, and just basically just dove right into. Without getting into too much of the long history or the backstory, just basically sat down, had conversations with people, in a settlement and people who live in Palestine, Palestinians. And, it's fascinating because the way that they edit and the way that they tell stories, he's there, but a lot of times it's not necessarily about him. He does a pretty good job of being fairly transparent and telling the story, not without himself being there at all, but giving it an idea of what it's like there, touching on whatever problems there may be. So yeah, I found that to be a really good show, and I think that I've never read his book, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to buy it in the next couple of months just to to have something else to read.
So, and you just took me to another tangent because I started reading books again this year, but they're audiobooks. And I've completely switched over to, Kindle app whenever I do read an actual book and read it. And then like the least cool technological thing you can do, but I discovered borrowing audiobooks and ebooks from the library. And I'm amazed that people don't know this exists, but you can pretty much get any book you want, audiobook or regular book, from any number of library systems online.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising because
I know this is going to mess up my Audible sponsorship, but whatever.
You think about the library as a place to get books, but I've sat down and talked with Ben Cox a number of times. I think just once in person, but just kind of talking about the libraries and how they're operating and some of the problems that they have, which is a really interesting kind of social issue. But talking to him about just the libraries are just effectively their mission is to get out information, and so while maybe they're not serving up books, they're still they're not serving up physical books. They're not having people check them out. It's still part of their mission to make sure that, ebooks or audiobooks are available to people. And
it's kind of interesting,
that's really cool
because they're not a business. They're
Mm-hmm.
not afraid to disrupt their business.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the library has a budget, but they don't necessarily have a bottom line, right? And that's really, it's nice. And yeah, I mean, my wife has done a couple ebooks from the library. I've gotten, I think, in the 6 or 7 years we lived in DC, I think I've gone and checked out a book twice. And both of them were like 800-page books that I just wanted to read and get an idea of whether or not I wanted to buy them. So, I mean, I bought like an 800-page book about World War II because I've just come to grips with the fact that I'm a dad now, so I might as well have a giant book about World War II. And yeah, it's just like whatever, let's get some books. But I listen to enough podcasts that I can see how audiobooks would be really useful. I have other things that I listen to, and I don't listen to stuff while I work. So
it's hard to listen to stuff like that while you work. I can't do audiobooks while I work, unless I'm not working.
Yeah.
But so how about this for an awkward segue? So speaking of long books,
mm-hmm.
You were telling me before we got on here that you got some ridiculously long cookbook.
I got a very large cookbook, yes. It's by Kenji Lopez Alt, who runs the website, or he's like the, chief recipe person, or culinary director, I guess, maybe, at SeriousEats.com. And it is, I found his writing, maybe like 2 years ago or so, and have been looking at his back catalog of recipes that probably go back 5 or 6 years, about as long as the website's been around.
For those listening, that's Kenji, like Kenji,
yep.
Lopez -Alt, ALT.
Yeah,
I just had to like Google it, and you don't want to know how I spelled it the first time. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can just search, type in the Food Lab.
Yeah, the Food Lab.
That's probably the easiest way. I think he's like at the Food Lab on Twitter, and has just done, a really good job of methodically breaking down dishes and trying a whole bunch of different methodologies or different additives to whatever recipe it might be. So, he'll have a recipe that, he says this is like, the best way to make real Texas chili con carne. And then he'll have an accompanying article that's probably 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 words long, complete with pictures of like, I tried this, I tried that, I tried all these different things. Some of the stuff that to really develop a taste with cooking, you have to do yourself, but to at least read through an iterative process of like, this food has this flavor, this food has that flavor. It's a really comprehensive website, and he had a cookbook come out. I think it arrived at my house last Monday, and it's like 900 pages, and it's probably got 100 pages in there before it even gets to recipes. But it's fantastic. And I haven't cooked anything out of it yet, although I have cooked a recipe that is one of his, and I think the recipe may be in the book, but I already had it. I had read it a couple years ago, but I made like a pork shoulder chili last weekend, and it's a hell of a book. It's really interesting, and for me as a person who's scientifically trained, the way that he describes things, it's got a subtitle, Better Home Cooking Through Science, the cookbook itself, but I find his writing to be very approachable and very readable for me, and then the way that he describes things and all of that breaks down, like, this is what you want to do with onions, this is 3 different ways to cook garlic, this is this, like, this is what you want to buy, etc.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think we've discovered in elementary schools and high schools and colleges that different people learn in different ways. Mm-hmm. But I think largely cooking, and I can't speak to culinary schools where chefs have been trained and different things like that, but I think the learning and the written materials about recipes has largely been the same since history created recipes. And only now in the last probably 10 years Are we, maybe explaining it differently or in different ways? Because I find a recipe to be the most unapproachable thing I've ever seen if you go back to like The Joy of Cooking.
Right.
But so often I go on a blog that has a recipe and yeah, there's an ingredients list, but beyond that, it's written in this kind of in a language that I can understand, that explains the steps and even warns me about a couple of the pitfalls. Those pitfalls never used to be covered in original recipes. Right.
Yeah. And I think that it's a lot of that's probably just the internet, because you're not confined to print, right? So you can kind of go on the tangents or the footnotes or the sort of related things if you want, and talk about how you fucked a dish up. And that's not a problem because you're not wasting a publisher's money. You're not putting 3 extra pages on, into a book that's probably already a couple hundred. So I think that, there are plenty of things that are really, really useful about the internet, but in terms of cooking, like knowing, aside from, the wonderful, comment sections on articles about food, like I think the Toast had a great, fake, like every comment that's ever been on any recipe page, like, oh, you made bread. Well, can I make this with like ground up rice and some milk? Like, I don't have these ingredients. How would you make this with fish if you're making like steak or something? Like, people commenting on the internet are idiots, but the content itself and people talking about not only like how they approach it, but the way that it's done is really useful. And like this book, to me, I'm slowly learning that, like, especially restaurant cooking is just batch processing. It's just effectively engineering. And so to see like the method by which a stew is made, where you first like get a really hot pan or like a Dutch oven, and then you sear the shit out of some meat, and then you take it out and you leave the little tiny bits of the meat in there, and then you cook some onions in there, and then you throw some other like herbs in there that are aromatic and dry, and then you keep cooking and stirring, and you throw some salt in there to dehydrate it, and then after that you deglaze the pan, where you just throw in something that's going to boil off, and you scrape the bottom, and you get all those brown bits of food in there that you had seared the meat. Like, I'm starting to see those sort of processes by reading through a number of recipes, whether they're, stew being a kind of particular food mechanism, but also like making chili is not all that different from making beef burgundy or from making coq au vin or something like that. And like starting to connect those threads, reading what Kenji's written on both on his site and kind of, in this cookbook have been really usable.
Well, it's so cool because I think you're gaining a lot of the information that was only previously available in like apprenticeships.
Yeah, that might be it. I don't know. Like I've read that, The Joy of Cooking in particular is just like one of those seminal cookbooks, but I haven't read it. I've seen Julia Child's Kitchen, and I've gone through, because it's at the American History Museum, and we took our daughter there because they have a giant transportation exhibit where they've got like 3 or 4 old locomotives in the museum. But we stopped by Julia Child's Kitchen and we pointed at all the pots and pans. So, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I think that cookbooks may not be all that different, but I've come to really appreciate Kenji's voice. And I think as a total document, if you're going to buy like a cookbook, probably the two editions of The Joy of Cooking, or 2 volumes of it, or like something like the Food Labs book, as it's sort of like a pan global cooking kind of thing, are great. And then you can always just buy, like, I have a book about smoking meat and I have a book about pizza, just specific cookbooks on how to do that. And I have another one about, it's called Ratio, and it's just about how you change the ratios of different ingredients to, instead of make a pancake, to make a muffin, to make like a popover, just, the different amounts of flour versus egg versus milk, like all that kind of stuff is, to me, really interesting. And they all kind of go together. But then again, like, I have these 5 cookbooks and I probably have cooked a combined like 12 recipes out of probably close to 2,000 pages, so maybe they're not like the most useful cookbooks.
See, now I'm really interested in that and the ratio thing, because I know there's a difference between a pancake batter and a waffle batter.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of kind of an interesting, fun story that I thought I would tell. I recently supported a local band in their Kickstarter for their album, and one of the categories was because their new album was something. Let's see, something the Great Blue Waffle. I'll just give him up. He came on the show too. It was my friend Joe from Something Involving a Monkey.
Okay.
And so the Dive into the Great Blue Waffle was the name of the album that they put together. And so one of the things was you support them, you get a copy of the CD, and then the band will come to your house and make blue waffles and do a waffle party. And so, but they were like purist about it. They wouldn't bring like one of those pre-made just add water waffle mixes.
Right.
They insisted on they had like the largest bottle of blue dye I'd ever seen, first of all, but second of all, they insisted on using just flour and measuring the right, measurements of everything. But cause I cheat, now that I make waffles at a moment's notice, it's just like the add water waffle mix. But I know there's a difference technically, like just like there's a difference between ice cream and custard. Custard
right.
has eggs in it. I know there's a subtle difference between pancake batter and waffle batter, or at least I think there is.
I'm not sure if there might be. I really don't know about that one.
But it was the coolest Kickstarter reward I ever got.
That is pretty cool. I mean, I've thought about for a while, like trying to find an old cast iron waffle, like iron, but they're really expensive because old cast iron stuff is just obscenely expensive. Thanks to things like Etsy and eBay and the like. But, shit, sorry. I kind of forgot where I was.
That's all right.
I don't mean to channel Brian too much, but I'm looking forward to your guys' new series. Was it Everything is Sensors and Everything? I'm really excited about that.
He's sending me articles on Twitter already, and good. Mostly based around like Nest.
Okay.
And all the Nest enabled products. We actually bought, when we moved in November, we had like one of these really archaic thermostats. And so I did go above and beyond and invested in the Nest. I have a number. How do you feel about it?
I really like it. Do you think it works pretty well?
I think it works very well. I don't know if it's saving me money or whatever, but I think the only way to make any kind of a difference in what you're doing is to know what you're doing. And so it definitely achieves that.
Okay. Cause I have a friend who, he set it, like he set sort of his like normal schedule, but then he never stays on his normal schedule, even though he's got a kid. And so he would say like, this thing pisses me off because I'll be in the room and I'll decide that nobody's in the room. I'm just in there thinking like, well, get off your ass and move. The thing has like dinosaur vision. It can only see you when if you're moving around, like get off your ass. But, he didn't seem as thrilled with it. I mean, I think that he also just assumed that it was like a world changer and it was, the new sliced bread or whatever. But, I've looked at, it seems like there are other options. I've considered one of those for our house as well. We did work on our house last year and we had a new HVAC system put in. And so they put in, whatever the cheapest thermostat was that you could buy. And I've thought about, buying either a Nest or Honeywell had one that looks like they got into some sort of bullshit, like intellectual property lawsuit where somebody like years ago decided they were going to just like patent troll and just say like, well, maybe not even patent trolling, but probably patent trolling. Like I'm just going to patent this idea and never do anything with it. And it was like geofencing related thermostat connectivity or something. And so they've stopped development while they're litigating this lawsuit. And then I think Ecobee has one that I've read really good things about. And that works with like Apple's home system. Okay. And as much as like, I don't know, I have a stronger I tend to distrust Apple less than other companies, Google being kind of chief there, but
even a company that was acquired by Google late.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So I think that I'm going to keep reading because the reviews of the Ecobee that supposedly works with Apple have been very good. And then they added the Apple connectivity. Like it was a good standalone product. And then it got this added, ability. So it's not like that's been their main feature all along, but it's one that has, you can get like little sensors that go up in particular spaces in your house. So it comes with one sensor in addition to the thermostat itself having like a thermocouple in or whatever. And then, so you can read out both, like in my instance, like I could read out in my daughter's room and then read out on the main floor. And I could basically set the target temperature in her room rather than the rest of the house, and sort of just futz with the registers to get the rest of the house kind of even. And then you can buy more sensors over time. So if I wanted to know, like in the winter time, like if I close the register in my basement, is it going to be, cold enough that I'm running into the risk of bursting a pipe again? Because I had that happen last winter. So that seems like a really compelling product. In addition to like probably not collecting my data. I don't know. I assume that probably everybody is, but like Apple's home system, they seem to respect their users' privacy far better than other companies. So I don't know. I'm really interested in. I've been trying to read about all of them, but I have a number of friends who are really happy with their Nest as well. So I mean, it and maybe it's just that sort of thing where like it seems like it's doing a lot, and you just like nobody's ever had a thermostat that tells them all this kind of shit before, right?
Right. Well, and I think it's going to be well more useful to me next year. So I have like a year-over-year sampling because like I'm looking at a report right now and it said that you used 160 hours of furnace time or whatever in July.
Okay.
But then in August it was down to 105. And now all that means is that it was probably cooler in August as a percentage, and so my air conditioner wasn't running as much, or maybe I was home less. But I'd like to see, like, year over year, what does August 2016 look like from August 2015? So I think it'll be. I mean, we'll see. First of all, I needed a new thermostat, and so it's really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if it justifies the money it costs or whatever, but we'll see.
Some of the things about it too, I mean, about all of the like sort of Wi-Fi connected data available thermostats. I mean, for me, we don't travel a whole lot, but now that my kid is not an infant anymore, travel seems like infinitely more possible. And so one of the worst things is like sitting, at least for me, there are millions of these sort of related topics, but it's like, did I forget to turn down the thermostat when we left? Like, are we going to come back and the house is going to be like, we're cooling our entire house while we're gone for a week or whatever. And so the idea of being able to like check just that little,
and that could be $100.
Right. And so like, it seems like it could, if I assume that I'm dumb and I would forget to turn the thermostat up in the summertime or whatever, and, there are ways that I could like mentally say, well, I'm saving myself money because if we leave the house for a week, twice next year and I forget both times, that basically is a savings. But, that assumes a lot. But still, that, I don't know, that the idea of being able to do something like that and check really is nice. I don't worry about a whole lot with the house aside from like, a tree coming down on it. But
well, it is nice, and it's not 100% necessary, but it's nice to be able to check it while you're out of town. And I did find myself checking on occasion to see, what was what while we were on a week's long vacation. And sure, is it overkill? I mean, I guess it's not necessary. We certainly got along before the Nest. We would get along without it now.
Right. I mean, the funny thing about like all of this is my house was built in the 1920s and it was built with like, I think a coal furnace in the basement, and there was no air conditioning there.
And first of all, it's amazing the house survived a coal furnace. without burning. I mean,
the whole
not
row
amazing.
survived. Like if all of the houses had coal furnaces, like the entire row is still here. Like, but yeah, like, you know, I think in the 20s maybe is around when the early thermostat technology started. I'm not exactly sure. I think the 20 sounds about right, just based on some of the designs that I've seen of old thermostats.
And that sounds like way too early to me, but I have no idea. It's just like my instinct says, no way they had thermostats in the 20s. But
yeah,
they probably did.
I've looked at. I mean, they were really nicely designed thermostats and everything. They probably also were among the most expensive things in the house, right? If you're like having your house heat itself or cool itself or whatever. But yeah, like I've spent plenty of time looking at that, and like, so my house was designed to operate without like DC summers with the unbearable heat and humidity, and the winters where it gets cold enough to be pretty cold. It was designed to handle that, and so it's kind of funny that like at this point I'm thinking about putting in like some sort of weird robot connected. Like internet connected thermostat, but that's how it goes, I guess.
So we're at about 36 minutes, and I think we've got time for one more topic, and we haven't talked about the one topic that you kind of brought up to me before we podcast, and that's the fact that you saw the Pope. I saw the Pope.
So last week, I think.
Are you Catholic?
Yeah. Well, I was raised Catholic. Am I active Catholic? No. Do I ever plan on going back? No. But I was raised in the Catholic Church, and so yeah, I got a message from a friend. He works like on Capitol Hill, and he said, "I've got extra tickets or like our office basically has extra tickets to see the Pope. Would you be interested in going?" And so I said, "Sure." So there was the papal address at the Capitol building, where he talked to a joint session of Congress, and basically my wife and I stood outside on the west lawn of the Capitol building, watching a live telecast of the Pope talking to Congress, which is basically like going to see the State of the Union, because it's not even like going to the inauguration where they're out and actually on the in front of the Capitol building. I was just watching a live telecast of what was inside, but then after the like roughly hour-long speech, the Pope and all the members, the ranking members of the House committees and the Senate committees and all that came out, and he waved to the crowd and blessed the crowd, and we saw him way, way up there, the guy wearing a white robes in the midst of everybody wearing like a dark gray business suit. So I've been blessed by the Pope, personally.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
My only, and I'm not judging any of the papal activities, but my only kind of observation while the Pope was in town was I was waiting at the barbershop between my kids getting their haircut, and CNN did an exhaustive analysis of the Pope walking up the steps of an airplane.
Yeah, it's
and I was like, okay, this is like this great, this almost universally respected, and I don't mean like the Pope in general, I mean this Pope in particular, like universally respected, and people are very interested in the way he's going about his business and the way he's going about philosophically and everything else.
Right.
And the way he looked a little bit awkward walking up the steps. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I forget the last time. I know that Pope Benedict came to the U.S. and he came to D.C. and he gave like a papal. Like he had masses at the National Stadium, but I don't remember exactly when that was. And so this was the first time that Pope had been here in a while, and it's the first time that this Pope had been here. And so it was, new Pope is something. in terms of my lapsed former Catholicism, like new Pope makes me reconsider a little bit, but then there's too much of the church that I can't get on board with. So I don't think that's changing anytime soon. But I really admire new Pope. I think he's really impressive and genuine and really just fantastic. Just as sort of like a world leader, as someone who's out there talking about these very humanistic sort of philosophies or whatever. Like he is a really interesting and
I think it is interesting because I think it's especially interesting because it initially when this guy became the Pope, it occurred to me that, well, maybe it's just an easy comparison. Maybe it's just it was a low hurdle to jump over. But I think it's more than that. I actually do think it's more than that.
Yeah, I don't know. And maybe if I would have seen Pope Benedict speak, maybe there would have been they're politicians as much as they're preachers, and so the great skill of politicians a lot of the time is for them to present whatever it is they're presenting and to seem very reasonable and very affable and very they've got conviction to what they're saying and it makes sense when they say it. And so it could be that the former Pope also kind of carried that with him, but the new Pope just seems to be something very different. And I mean, a lot of that is just my sort of like city dwelling progressive liberalism looking at the new Pope and saying, oh, he's wonderful. But it was really cool to see, and it was really interesting to see the sort of points that he tried to hammer on, and also through our own lens, the points that people in Congress tried to really resoundingly applaud. And the turns that he, it's the same sort of thing. It's this sort of multidimensional chess where he's trying to talk to our, America's leaders in terms of, being, like in one of the Catholic churches, large tent poles is, all supporting all life. And so, he said something about supporting life, at all times, and everybody stood up and cheered. And, through our own lens, everybody was thinking that the Pope is talking about abortion. And then, the line after that is he says something about that, and that's why we must not support the death penalty, or abolish the death penalty as a thing. And then like half of the Congress just sat down in their seats and were like, "Oh," it's like he pulled a fast one on them or something. And so just kind of watching all of that is to me really interesting, and a lot of that's probably because I live in Washington and I can't help but be surrounded by it. But at the same time, it's something that's it was really cool to go see, and it was really neat to see. Like there were a lot of kids. There were a lot of kids running around in the crowd, like out on the lawn, and I didn't realize that a lot of people were bringing their kids to have their kids blessed by the Pope. But I guess in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense, right? The Pope's going to bless the crowd, and if you've got a chance, you take your kids to get blessed. I don't know a whole lot about the Catholic Church, but I know that that's certainly a thing. So,
wow, I never even considered that.
Yeah, like everybody, so there were just kids running around, and it was he spoke at 10 a.m. and so this crowd blessing was 11 a.m. So it was really interesting, and it was like. We haven't gone to inaugurations. I think regardless of who gets elected in the next presidential election, I may just take a day off of work and go down and
you're not going. Oh, actually, I was going to say you're not going to go if it's Trump, but then I think you might go.
No,
more if
I
it's
would
Trump.
Absolutely go watch Donald Trump be inaugurated.
It won't.
It would be the most beautiful.
It won't be.
It'll be the most fantastic inauguration there's ever been, Craig. Why wouldn't I go see it? No, I mean, I think that just as an observer, I may go to the next one just to see, because I lived in the area. I didn't live in Washington for the first election or the first Obama inauguration. And then the second one, I stayed home and I watched the inauguration on TV. And I think whoever it is next time around, I'm probably just going to go check it out because, I mean, that's one of the neat things about living around here is when these big political things happen, like I can just go for a walk and kind of see how people are reacting.
It really is ill-timed in terms of seasonal.
Yeah, I had neighbors who they were talking like kind of, like this whole Pope, coming in late September really sort of hammers home that like we should have an inauguration sometime, around that sort of time. But with elections being in early November, like what are you going to do? You can't really wait. I mean, I you could change everything so that it would, be later. But yeah, I don't know. It's really, it was really nice to just stand outside. It was even an unseasonably warm day and it was fine. We were just standing out and it was 10 in the morning and maybe because I was wearing like a heavy button down, like it was a little bit sweaty, but it wasn't bad. Like,
well, that's really cool. Just one of those events to say you were there.
Yeah.
My only even remotely comparable thing is, I went to a campaign event back in 90, well, I guess not 92, or maybe it was 92 for when Clinton and Gore were running. Mm-hmm. And I saw Bill Clinton speak. And so that felt like, regardless of anything else, I was at like this giant thing that everybody will kind of remember in a way. But man, the Pope is way more universal than any presidential candidate who's running, even the ones who win.
Yeah, I mean, I've got these two very official tickets that say United States Congress.
I thought you were going to say T-shirt. You got like a Pope.
No, t-shirt. I didn't buy a Pope T-shirt.
Were people selling them?
Oh yeah, and I saw the guy that gave me the tickets works in the house somewhere, and he was like taking pictures afterwards. And apparently, Dennis Kucinich was buying like Pope swag from somebody afterwards. So there's always that, right?
See, I'm so happy now because now I've got the final bullet point for this podcast. Dennis Kucinich buying Pope swag.
Buys Pope swag, yep.
Cool, man. Well, that was really fun.
Yeah.
And I started out in a bad mood because, people got shot today and the president was talking about that. Mm-hmm. And we didn't even have to talk about that. And
well, it's okay. You brought it back up. So we'll hit end and then stew on it.
I'm a podcasting machine tonight. I got to talk about music next. So, but no, I'm cheating on all my podcast guests with more and more podcast guests.
Oh, that's fine.
No, thanks so much for, I certainly, I miss the casual Friday. It was so much fun to do. And it's always, whatever we end up talking about, it's always really a lot of fun. So thanks.
Oh, yeah, of course. It was good talking with you.
Until next time, everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.
Waiting for next year.